You don't enter a medieval royal wedding night like a husband and wife. You enter it like a treaty being signed. The hall is still loud with music when a hand finds your elbow and steers you away. Torches crackle. Stone sweats cold. Your dress is heavy with embroidery that feels less like beauty and more like armor. Behind you, laughter swells, then thins, then becomes a distant ocean you're no longer allowed to swim in. The corridor narrows. Your shoes whisper on rushes. A priest murmurs words you can't quite catch. A lady in waiting adjusts your veil with fingers that don't tremble. Everyone around you moves with practiced calm, as if this is not intimacy, but ceremony. Because here, it is. At the chamber door, they don't ask if you're ready. They ask if you understand your duty. Softly, the way people speak when they think resistance is childish. Inside, the room smells of wax, smoke, and crushed herbs meant to guard your future. The bed is enormous, draped in linen as white as a promise. Banners hang like verdicts. Your new ring is heavy on your hand, and you suddenly understand what it really is. A public claim. Then the door opens behind you and people file in. Courtiers, attendants, witnesses, faces arranged into polite smiles. They look at you the way officials look at a seal on a document, not with affection, but with expectation. The chamberlain clears his throat. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone coughs like a warning. This is the part the songs skip. The bedding ceremony, the watching, the counting of steps and speeches, the reminder that a marriage can be questioned, annulled, mocked, or weaponized if proof is disputed. Someone says a prayer. Someone makes a joke. Someone checks the sheets as if the fabric itself must report the truth. You stand there, crowned and helpless, and realize what the romance never mentions. Tonight is not about love. It is about legitimacy. And in a world where legitimacy decides inheritance, alliances, and wars, your body is the battlefield. People like to imagine medieval royal weddings as candlelit romance, silk sleeves, vows, a kiss, and then a private happily ever after behind a carved oak door. But royal wedding nights were rarely private. They were political checkpoints, because the marriage wasn't complete in the eyes of law, church, and court until it was considered consummated, a word that sounds gentle until you hear what it really means. The crown needs certainty. The dynasty needs heirs. The alliance needs proof that the treaty has taken flesh. So the bedroom becomes an institution. You get rituals designed to control the narrative, witnesses who escort the couple to bed, prayers that sound like commands, attendants who stay close enough to report what happened without ever admitting what they saw. And if anything goes wrong, no pregnancy, no heir. A single night of doubt. Blame is assigned. Quietly, efficiently, like ink on parchment. You get rumors treated like evidence, and evidence treated like propaganda. If a queen doesn't produce a child fast enough, the night becomes a weapon used against her. If a king wants out, the same proof can be twisted into doubt. History polished this into charming folklore. Jokes about stockings, bawdy songs, harmless tradition. In this script, we're going to peel that shine away. You'll see how wedding nights were used to discipline royal women, how the church's rules about validity turned bodies into legal arguments, and how entire courts positioned themselves at the edge of a bed so they could control succession from the first hour. By the end, you won't hear royal wedding night the same way again. In the medieval world, a royal marriage is not a private promise. It is a public strategy. Outside the castle walls, people pray for peace and fear famine. Inside the great hall, nobles drink to love while calculating borders. A wedding joins more than two families. It joins armies, titles, and claims. Land moves. Taxes move. Hostages move. And at the center of all that movement is one fragile idea the entire system depends on: legitimacy. Because legitimacy decides who inherits, who commands, and who is allowed to call rebellion justice. A crown without legitimacy is a crown everyone feels entitled to test. That's why the wedding night mattered so much. Not for romance, but for certainty. In many kingdoms, the church treated marriage as sacred, but it also treated it as something that could be judged, annulled, questioned, undone. Canon law had categories and loopholes: consent, consummation, impediments, kinship, prior vows. The language sounds theological, but the effect is brutally practical. If a marriage can be declared invalid, then heirs can be declared illegitimate, and alliances can be rewritten overnight. And royalty lives under microscopes. Ambassadors report home. Courtiers compete for influence. Servants hear everything. In a palace, privacy is not a right. It's a privilege someone can revoke. A foreign bride may arrive speaking the wrong language, praying in the wrong accent, wearing the wrong jewelry, and still be expected to produce the one thing everyone wants: a child who will silence doubt. Until that child exists, your position is temporary. Your body is discussed like policy, so the royal bedroom becomes a courtroom in advance, not with a judge sitting at the bed, but with a court hovering close enough to control the story afterward. Ladies in waiting, chamberlains, priests, people whose job is to witness without saying they witnessed. A bedding ritual in some courts, a procession in others, blessings and jokes and symbolic gestures that turn a human moment into an official event. Doors that are closed, but never fully private. Silence that is listened to. Footsteps that pause outside and pretend they didn't. Sometimes the proof becomes theatre, a morning display of sheets, a public confirmation that everything went as it was supposed to go. Not because fabric can tell the truth, but because the court needs a story simple enough to repeat. And then the pressure shifts to the one outcome everyone demands: an heir. If a queen becomes pregnant quickly, the court relaxes. If she doesn't, the court sharpens. Suddenly, every glance is diagnosis. Every whisper is theory. Was she cold? Was he weak? Was the match cursed? Was someone lying about what happened or didn't happen behind oak and linen? In a world without modern medicine, rumor becomes forensic science, and reputation becomes evidence. This is why wedding nights were staged so carefully, because the goal wasn't only to create intimacy. The goal was to create a narrative no one could challenge, a narrative the church would accept, a narrative the nobles would repeat, a narrative the people would believe. Once you see that, you understand the real setting. A medieval royal court is a machine that runs on appearances. Honor is performance. Piety is performance. Even privacy is performance. And now that you understand the world, we can talk about the procedures, how courts manufactured proof, assigned blame, and turned a queen's body into a political document that could be signed or erased. Here's what the romantic version never admits. The royal wedding night wasn't a private beginning. It was a public procedure designed to control the story before the story could escape. Because in a medieval court, a marriage is only as strong as the court's ability to prove it. So they build the night in layers, like a ceremony inside a ceremony, until intimacy becomes something administered. The first procedure is staging. You're escorted, not simply led. The route is chosen. The timing is chosen. Who walks beside you is chosen. A priest may bless the doorway. A chamberlain may announce the bedding like it's the start of a legal act. Jokes are made, not because people are amused, but because laughter is a way to disguise control. Even the teasing has a purpose. It normalizes what would otherwise feel obscene. an entire court orbiting a bed. Then comes the second procedure, witness. The court doesn't need to see everything. It needs enough proximity to claim certainty later. This is why attendants hover, why doors don't close like they should, why people linger a few breaths too long before leaving. It creates a fog of implied knowledge, so that when rumors start, the powerful can say, "We know what happened," and the powerless cannot easily say, "No, you don't." In some places, that witness becomes tradition, the bedding ceremony, the symbolic removal of shoes or stockings, the public escort to the mattress. In other places, it's quieter, but the logic is identical. The goal is always the same. Make the night belong to the institution, not the couple. The third procedure is proof-making. This is where courts become disturbingly practical, because medieval law and church doctrine cared about consummation, not as romance, but as validation. If a marriage can be disputed, it can be attacked. If it can be attacked, it can be undone. So the court tries to manufacture an unchallengeable narrative. Sometimes that means the morning theatre, servants, ladies and officials who inspect and report, not because linen is a witness, but because the report itself becomes a weapon. A statement repeated enough times becomes truth. A sheet becomes a symbol the court can carry like a banner. It happened. It is real. Do not question it. And if the sheet provides no convenient story, the court doesn't pause and reflect. It improvises. Because the point isn't accuracy. The point is control. Now the fourth procedure, time pressure. Once the wedding night is completed, a countdown begins. A queen's body becomes a calendar. The court watches months like a battlefield watches smoke. No pregnancy. Anxiety rises, and anxiety always looks for someone to blame. This is the moment when medical ignorance becomes political strategy. A failed pregnancy becomes a scandal. A delayed pregnancy becomes a suspicion. Every natural variation of the human body becomes evidence of moral failure. Midwives become interrogators. Confessors become surveillance. The queen is advised, instructed, restricted. Her diet, her sleep, her prayers, her movements, because the court wants a child like it wants peace, immediately and on its own terms. And here's the cruel trick. If a queen produces an heir quickly, the story becomes triumph. If she doesn't, the story becomes accusation. That leads to the fifth procedure, narrative assignment. The court decides what you are. If you are useful, you are virtuous. If you are inconvenient, you are cold. If an alliance turns sour, you become barren. If a king wants another match, you become invalid. The same vocabulary repeats across courts because it's efficient. It turns political desire into moral judgment. And moral judgment is easier to sell than ambition. This is where annulment logic becomes a loaded gun hanging on the wall. If someone powerful needs to break the marriage, the night can be reinterpreted. Consent questioned. Consummation disputed. Impediments discovered. The church's language, holy, solemn, formal, can be turned into a blade so sharp it cuts children out of inheritance. So the wedding night isn't just a first night. It's the foundation of a future argument. And once you see that, you notice the sixth procedure, containment. A foreign bride is often isolated immediately after marriage, not always brutally, but strategically. Her household is reorganized. Her attendants are screened. Letters are filtered. Access is negotiated. Because the court understands something the love stories ignore. A queen with privacy can build influence. A queen without privacy becomes manageable. Even affection becomes regulated. Who can speak to her? Who can advise her? Who can touch her hair, her sleeves, her secrets? In a palace, intimacy spreads power. So the palace tries to direct intimacy like water through channels. And finally, the seventh procedure, sacralization. Everything is wrapped in religion and honor, so it looks pure on the surface. Prayers, blessings, holy language, the claim that this is for God, for the realm, for the future. That sacred coating doesn't reduce the violence of control. It disguises it. It turns obedience into virtue and resistance into sin, which is why royal wedding nights could be terrifying without a single explicit act being described. The fear is not only physical, the fear is structural. You are being watched, measured, narrated, and evaluated by a system that cares about your feelings only as they affect the outcome. And the outcome is simple: a legitimate heir, a stable alliance, a story the court can defend. So the wedding night becomes the first lesson a queen learns in the hardest language of medieval power. Your life is not only yours anymore. And once that lesson is taught, the machine moves to its next step. What happens when the proof is questioned, when no heir appears, or when the court decides it needs a different story? If you say next, I'll write Section 5, Escalation, approximately 5,600 to 5,900 characters. The rumor wars, the barren queen myth-making, annulment traps, scapegoating, and how courts quietly destroyed women's reputations to rewrite politics. Once you understand the machine, you start to see why the most dangerous part of a royal wedding night wasn't what happened in the bed. It was what happened after, in whispers, letters, sermons, and councils, when people decided the night meant something different than you thought. Because medieval courts didn't just watch events, they edited them. And the moment an alliance becomes inconvenient, the wedding night becomes the first place people go hunting for a crack. The language is always polite at first. Are you comfortable, Your Grace? Are you feeling well? Is there anything troubling you? But underneath the silk words is the same question, sharpened into a spear. Where is the heir? If months pass and there is no pregnancy, the court starts to treat time like evidence, and evidence demands a culprit. So the story begins to form around you, not as a person, but as a problem that needs explaining. You become cold. You become proud. You become unfertile. You become cursed. Notice how efficient those labels are. They turn a political emergency into a moral flaw. They make it sound like nature or God is speaking, when it is really the court speaking through God's mouth. And once the story exists, everything you do feeds it. If you grieve, you are unstable. If you smile, you are shameless. If you pray, you are superstitious. If you don't pray, you are impious. A trap that tightens no matter which way you move. This is when the Queen's household becomes a battlefield. Your ladies are questioned. Your servants are watched. Your letters arrive already opened. Your physician suddenly has opinions that sound suspiciously like politics. Your confessor asks gentle questions that feel like interrogation, because the court wants something more useful than truth. It wants a narrative it can defend. And if the narrative needs a villain, the easiest villain is the woman whose body is already being discussed like policy. Then comes the cruelest escalation. Public suspicion dressed as concern. A rumor starts small. One sentence. One I heard. It spreads because it is valuable. Noble families trade rumors the way merchants trade cloth, not because they love scandal, but because scandal can move power. If enough people repeat the same doubt, the doubt starts to look like a fact. Was the marriage truly completed? Was it valid? Was the couple compatible? Was there an impediment no one noticed? These questions sound technical, even holy. In practice, they are weapons that can erase a queen's future without a single sword being drawn. Because here is the terrifying legal reality. If a marriage can be questioned, then children can be questioned. And if children can be questioned, then inheritance can be ripped apart like parchment. So the court begins to build an exit ramp, not by admitting ambition, never that, by manufacturing righteousness. A council meets, a bishop is consulted, old genealogies are examined until a forbidden kinship is discovered. A prior vow is rumoured, a procedural flaw is emphasised. Suddenly, the marriage isn't being broken because someone wants a new alliance. It's being broken because God requires purity, because the law demands truth, because the realm deserves stability. And stability is the word that can justify anything. Now imagine what that does to a woman trapped inside the story. You were brought here as a symbol of peace. You learned the language, the rituals, the posture. You played your part in public, and you did it well. But the moment the political weather changes, the court can turn around and say, "You were never the solution. You were the mistake." This is how queens are quietly destroyed without blood. They isolate you first. Invitations stop. Audiences shrink. Your influence is managed. A new favorite advisor appears beside the king like a shadow that wasn't there yesterday. Decisions begin to happen without you. You learn news after it's already been decided. You start to feel your title becoming decorative, like jewelry pinned to a dress no one respects. Then the court begins to rehearse your replacement. A new match is mentioned, hypothetically. A foreign princess is praised innocently. An ambassador's visit becomes routine. You hear these things the way someone hears thunder behind mountains. You can't see the storm yet, but you know it's coming. And here's the detail. History softens into comedy. The court loves to turn this cruelty into jokes. Bawdy songs, teasing, tales about stockings and sheets. Because humor is a mask that lets people participate without admitting they are harming someone. When a room laughs, it becomes harder to call what's happening violence. But it is violence. Not always physical. Often worse, reputational violence, legal violence, political violence. The kind that follows you, even if you survive. Because even if the marriage is not annulled, the doubt can do its work. A queen labelled barren becomes a liability. A queen whispered about becomes isolated. A queen isolated becomes weak. And a weak queen is easy to control. That is the court's final lesson. Your wedding night was never only yours. It belongs to the people who will tell the story afterward. So when you hear medieval romance painted as candlelight and devotion, remember the hidden machinery behind the carved oak door. Witnesses, proof, rumors, and the quiet decision that if the realm needs a different outcome, your life can be rewritten as easily as a line of ink. The polished story ends with candlelight and carved oak. Like a royal wedding night was the first private moment two people finally owned. But medieval power doesn't care about privacy. It cares about proof. For most royal women, there was no gentle beginning, only a ritual designed to produce legitimacy. A procession into a chamber, a court hovering at the edge of the door, a mourning that could be turned into evidence, and then the long, silent countdown. A body measured in months, a womb measured in rumors, a life measured in whether the realm got what it wanted. That's the secret history doesn't like to dwell on. The wedding night wasn't romance. It was an institution performing certainty. And institutions don't ask how you feel. They ask what you can produce. So the next time you see medieval weddings sold as fairy tales, remember what was hiding behind the linen and prayers. A court that could turn one night into a verdict and call it sacred. Because the most terrifying part wasn't the watching. It was the way the world pretended it was normal.